Oh boy, did we get a bunch of comments and questions when we posted our Christmas in July video just a few weeks back. That's right, this awesome quilt that is the Poinsettia Millefiori pattern by Miranda Stewart, but I was calling it a stack and whack or a one block wonder or a kaleidoscope. Anyways, tons of comments, tons of feedback, so I've got tons of answers for all of you. Let's get started. That's right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Making It Fun right here on YouTube from Michael Miller Fabrics. I am your host, Rob Appel, and I'm super excited to see all of you on this kind of part two. And no, there wasn't a part two originally intended to this video, but I did ask a couple of questions of all of you out there, and I got a bunch of great feedback, but I also realized there was a couple construction-based questions that I really didn't answer for all of you. So I apologize, but this is the greatest thing about YouTube is we're just going to put up another video. And like I said, the other one's done so incredibly well, like 30,000 views in the first week. Are you kidding me? Thank you all for the incredible support. So we're just going to have some fun here today. And we're going to go over a lot more construction on the design wall. But before we even get started, I really want to apologize to my dear friend Miranda Stewart, who actually created this awesome free pattern. Free pattern description is in, the free pattern link is in the description below. But she created this pattern and she's a dear friend of mine, actually helped me get my job at Michael Miller a million years ago. So she created this design using the poinsettia, the scarlet poinsettia fabric from Michael Miller. So I want to make sure, and this is really important to all of us out there and all of us other creators, that it's really important that we apply credit where credit is due. So Miranda, thank you so much again for another amazing quilt. She does a bunch of our show quilts for us at Michael Miller, and she's just a wonderful part of our team. So I apologize for forgetting to mention her name in the last video. The last video I was talking about, is this a stack and whack? Is this a one block wonder? Is this a kaleidoscope? And the answer is yes, but I also asked all of you for feedback. What did you know out there? And so I did get some good input. I've double checked the sources. And so I just want to mention also, Miriam Rosenthal did the one block wonder. As I said, Bethany Reynolds did the stack and whack. And then of course, Paula Nedalstern, has done the kaleidoscope version that those two books or lessons and techniques are built after. So at any rate, again, it's always wonderful in the world of quilting, the way we can take patterns and develop patterns and play off of each other's patterns. But again, I always want to make sure that I give the proper credit where it is due. So anyways, one of the other things we were talking about was Christmas in July. And I know this is now an August video that will go on and live forever, but this is a fabulous, fabulous poinsettia print that has been part of our heritage collection at Michael Miller, meaning that it's been in your local quilt shops for a couple of seasons and you can get it and you can get more of it, and it's just awesome. Of course, it coordinates nice with fairy frost and our jet black, and you know me, I just love to talk about fabric. Now, I'm going to kind of blast through some of the beginning info because like I said, we've got the other video out there to help all of you get the basics. And what we were really focusing on that first video was, how do we find our repeat? How do we get the repeat in our fabrics? Because what we need is 6 identical pieces. So as you can see here, I've cut these 6 identical pieces of fabric as I've gone through. And I've been moving them around on the table, so they're not perfectly organized anymore. But one of the things I did talk about, and this was something I learned in a video from Donna Jordan and her husband, was instead of looking at the print, because sometimes the prints you're using aren't, what do I want to say? They're harder to find the actual repeat within. So if you find the same key markers on your selvage, like I used the number just past this 15 when I was cutting, I was able to line up all of my chunks of fabric. So I had 6 pieces, 6 big chunks, and it was about a 24-inch repeat. So I then divided that down into, again, even columns or something within there, and I ended up with 4-inch strips. So they were cut off the fabric, and they were cut double folded like this, but they were just cut, so that was like 12 layers. Yeah, pretty tough, but I was cutting straight lines. So one of the awesome questions we had in the comments was, wow, are you really cutting that way when you're cutting the triangles? And no, I'm not, because the triangles, based on the bias in the fabric, they're gonna shift a little bit more, or have the tendency to shift a little bit more. A lot of folks, including myself, will suggest that you put a straight pin or 2 through here to hold things in place. But no, once I've already cut the strips at 4 inches off of my base fabrics, and I did do that in a stack of 6 pieces folded, so yeah, it was 12. Let's stop there. The bigger your rotary cutter, the deeper, the safer, the straighter your cut. So I was using the 60 millimeter rotary cutter intentionally on purpose so that I could make a really nice, accurate, straight cut. But once it came time to cut my triangles, using something like your Creative Grids ruler, of course, then I went ahead and I took the time to open these all up. And you know, when I'm working on these small spaces on the table, it can be a little bit of a challenge. So I didn't cut a ton, just enough to build one hexagon. Now this whole quilt's made from hexagons, and that's, I think, where I kind of left you all hanging out there. So let's go ahead and kind of bring the video back together there with the follow-up. So I have now taken these, so they're now single layer, but I've still lined them up so that everything is perfectly organized, perfectly in line with the printed repeat of the fabric. Now, if you look on the design wall over here, you can see I've started to kind of fill in the gaps. And those gaps are filled in with half triangles. And we often cut those as we're beginning or we're starting as we're cleaning off the selvage. So that's one of the first things we can do here today is I'm just going to take and I'm going to go ahead and cut. And I've laid my fabric now, so it's easy for me to cut triangles, but a little harder to cut the straight lines. So I've got that cut off of there. And now most rulers, no matter what manufacturer, they're gonna have lines in them that help you cut these half triangles, because you don't want a point up there. You want that 1/4 inch for your seam allowance, because we are still making a quilt, ladies and gentlemen. So now that I've already gone ahead and cut that, what I can do is a couple of different things. I can come down here and I'm going to take the tip of this and I'm going to bring it so that my black line that gives me a 1/4 from the top down is right on that straight cut I just cut. And as I go ahead and cut this, now I'm going to go ahead and cut the half triangles that will fill in the sides. The top and the bottom are going to be straight lines that are accompanied by the hexagons we're actually building. But you need triangles facing both directions. So you can see here, I've just cut the 2 half triangles in the same direction. So what I want to do now is see if I can't get these. I'll show you again. We're going to cut these in the opposite direction. Okay. So now in order to do this, it's a bit of a trick, but I can take that line. You can see now I'm actually using the opposite side of my ruler. And so in order to do that, I'm just running the black line, the center line from the ruler up. And of course, these would be cut easily from the other side as well. I'm not always left-handed, so I'm going to go nice and slow here, and I don't want to travel all the way through and cut the other side there. But now you can see with our half triangles, I have both sides, and that'll help me fill in the gap on the design wall as we go. But for those of you who missed the first video, of course I could say just go back and watch the first video, which I think you should. And while you're there, make sure you subscribe to Making It Fun. It's wonderful to see those numbers growing. But let's take a moment and just blast through one more hexagon so all of you can see how we're going to handle putting together the repeats. So at any rate, I've gotten now a diagonal or bias cut. I want to go ahead and make the entire thing into a triangle. So I've got it lined up here. I've got it lined up on my outside edge. And now I'm just going to go ahead and cut nicely through there. And of course, the easiest way to do this entire project is to cut through all of these strips at once. But remember, we're doing a Q for your A's out there. Oh, I hope that didn't sound too bad. Basically answering those questions out there. So one of the other questions I got in the comments was, how many strips do we really need? And you really don't need that many. This entire chunk up here, which is roughly 25% of the quilt top, is made from just one strip. So I sewed my half hexies together up here, and I'm calling them half hexies now because remember, we want to be able to take them off and yet move them around because we don't want any Y seams. Now I know how to do a Y seam, but all of those as Y seams would drive us mad. So we're going to get how to sew these in a few minutes, but that was partly the questions that were being asked. So at any rate, let's get back to building a hexagon out of 6 triangles. Now you're going to have multiple options. One of the things we talked about in our project was how the color played throughout Miranda's quilt. It was really neat the way she laid out the darks and the lights kind of in a triangular fashion, because that keeps your eyes very interested when you're studying a project, any kind of art. It's just one of those tricks. So regardless if you have a blunt tip or a triangular tip, we can go ahead and rearrange these, but the key is to make sure that the same fabric touches over and over again. So let's just use this green right now. It'll be very easy for us to all see. And I'm just going to go ahead and start to lay these out, and they go around, and you can see here, pushing those greens together, just like this, and that's going to now form the kaleidoscope you see in the individual hexagons. But now we're going to go ahead and build these into half hexes. So let's just take two at a time, and all we really have to do to get a nice accurate stitch on these to come together, regardless if it's a flat tip or a pointy tip, line them up, lay them on top of each other, right sides together. But not only are you looking at this edge, but you'll also be using your bottom edge to make sure that things line up nicely as well. Come on over to your sewing machine. Of course, you've got it set up for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm playing with a new sewing foot today because I wanted to. It's the best part of my job. So anyways, still a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now I'm just going to go ahead. I don't bother to backstitch in any of these. So I can come through just like that. And as a matter of fact, those of you who are chain piecers or assembly line kind of sewers, maybe you have a little Henry Ford in you somewhere, you can actually do these chain piece style, but just keep track of what you're doing. So these are going to be the next ones. So right now I'm going to take these two, fold them together, making sure I remember which is my seam allowance, and come on over to the machine and just get ready to lay that through there too. Nice and easy because you're sewing on the bias. If you've heard my tricks before, you might want to shorten up your seam allowance a little bit, or your stitch length, I should say, not your seam allowance. That's always a 1/4 inch. Have I had too much caffeine? It sounds like I might have had too much caffeine. Okay, let's cut these apart. And now we're just going to go take care of some of our pressing matters. And right now I have no idea which direction we're going, so I'm going to press to that side. And I'll press to that side as well. But the point is, pressing before I try to add on the next hexes, okay? Or the next triangles. Let's bring these back in and make sure that we still have those green tips coming together, And now, this is where the point's gonna really matter, because not only have I folded it over and matched up here, but again, I'm matching up that bottom seam, and that's super important. I rotated it just because it's easier on my hands. I like to have the bulk of the fabric down on the machine, so the two triangles on the feed dogs, one up. Sometimes you'll catch that little seam on your stitch plate. Don't worry about it. Just take a moment and adjust. And then come all the way through. And again, we're chain piecing, so we're going to go ahead and flip this over. And now I'm matching up the top. You see how I did that? Fun. Okay? And I'm rotating, so you can see again, it won't matter which approach we're doing as long as we're just using that same 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's go ahead and cut those apart again, and now we'll have our two half hexes. So in the first video I mentioned you may want to put a straight pin together to keep track, but also we can just go right to the design wall after we finish pressing them out. There's our finished kaleidoscope. Right? Looks awesome, and each one is going to be unique and different. And of course, you can always rotate the different fabrics. They didn't have to start with the blunt tip to the triangle. I just wanted to use this green so it would be very easy to find as I worked my way around the project. Now this one I find is a little bit dark, and I was working my lighter sections over here and up or into the middle. So as we come down to the design wall, I want you to be able to see this is going to fit up right in here very nicely, and then this will fit up here really nicely, okay? Now I did mention before that it's a straight edge across the top and or bottom of the project, but I want to talk about for a moment before we start putting the construction together is I want to talk about what happens in these spots here, because as you can see, we've got a gap or a half triangle that's missing, so we're going to need to use these half triangles we've cut from the end of all of our strips. And like I said before, you're going to have some that are kind of lefts and you're going to have some that are kind of rights. So in that case, we're just going to go ahead now and find the ones we need to fit into the wall. Just like this. This is the kind of project that you're really wisest to build your entire layout before you start sewing anything together. But of course, I don't have that kind of time today to show you, and I've been drinking coffee again. But I will show you in just a moment how to put the straight lines together and make it super simple for you. Oops, I grabbed the wrong stack. Here we go again. These are going to fit back in here. And you can see it's not really doing that kaleidoscope effect anymore on the edge, but it is certainly filling it in and it's not really distracting your eye. But do play with your colors. Remember, color is always important. Hey, we're quilters, right? Filling in that other half there. And of course, I'll have another one that goes down here behind the fat quarter bundles. But let's go ahead and show all of you how easy the construction is now going to be to put these together in rows. So as a reminder, make all of your design, make all of your layout before you start putting these together. But this is another question I wanted to answer. Several folks in the comments said, why are you not sewing the hexagons together completely? Why are you not taking these two half hexes and sewing them together right now before we put them on the design wall? And that's because that would create what we call a Y seam. That's going to be a very hard seam to stitch in there, right? It's not even a Y, it's like a weird flat W or V or something. So this is going to be a tough seam for sure. But if you look carefully now, this is just a straight edge across here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to match up those seams as I come off of the wall. Bring it so you can see it a little bit better. And now as I get ready to drop in this half triangle, okay, I'm just making sure that I've accounted for the seam allowance, I've accounted for the bottom, and don't forget, there's a 1/4 inch hidden down here in the seam. So you might want to run that a little bit long because you know triangles run long when sewing in a straight line. Okay, now we're going to come over to the machine, stitch this down. And you know I'm a real fan of pressing after each step. So let's go ahead and just take a moment and do that right now. Okay, and you can see how nicely that fit into that edge, okay? Now as I go back to the design wall, I just want to either take this with me so I can grab these two pieces together as I come back off. I don't want to miss anything. Now I'm just going to fold them over, and it's really just a straight line as we sew. Making sure that everything fits in correctly. That was a blunt tip, so it's designed to fit in there straight like that. Come on over to the machine. Back to the iron. And if you get confused which side is which, remember that's the straight and this is our diagonal. So now I can kind of just leave this down flat. I can grab this up over here. I can make sure it matches in, right? Fold it over. And we're just now going to build the whole project into rows. Okay? Because once they're rows, rows are super easy to sew together to finish off our quilt tops. Press it again. Let's do one more together. Pull that off, make sure it all matches up. Fold it over using those flat tips. It's one of the reasons I really love those Creative Grids rulers is because they do offer that blunt tip up there, and it really does make a difference when you're assembling these. Sometimes if you need a little extra for your eye. And I just realized if I stop sewing this row together right now, I can actually continue to build my quilt and come back with it all finished. And I don't want to waste all of this wonderful work I've been doing, but I really wanted to show you now that there's strips, Super easy to sew back together, right? So I'm just going to put this back up on the design wall. It's going to have changed size a little bit, but not by much, because when I put it on my design wall, I actually accounted for the overlap as I was putting on most of those hexagons, or I should say half hexes, because that was part of what I was explaining in both the first video and today's video while I'm trying to answer up a bunch of those questions. So I think I'm going to keep playing with this. I'm going to encourage all of you once again to make sure you're subscribed to Making It Fun, and keep those awesome comments going. Keep sharing these videos with all of your friends, all of the local quilt shops out there, because we really do appreciate your support. Hey, even if it's not Christmas in July anymore, don't forget to pick up some of our awesome scarlet poinsettia fabric, and we will see you next time at Making It Fun. Wow, you are still there. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of the video. I know, I get a little long-winded sometimes. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you check out a few of the other ones we've created. I think they're terrific. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the little bell to be notified. I don't want you to miss a moment of the fun. Stay safe and happy sewing.